Amateur Radio News and Notes for Friday, March 28th, 2025. I'm Ed K1RA, November 2, Echo Charlie. In the log this week, we've got the MVARC Breakfast and Meeting Recap, also looking ahead to what we'll be having next month. A contest spotlight for CQ Worldwide WPX contest happening this weekend. Also, we'll talk about the HF Signals zBitx radios that start shipping this week. Also, we'll talk about some MVARC Nets on the air, see what's happening with DX, get a solar activity update, talk about some upcoming contests, and also give some interesting online radio content. Last weekend, MVARC had both our monthly breakfast and monthly meeting on Saturday. We had a good turnout to both, with lots of folks joining in the conversation at the breakfast and many joining us for the meeting as well. At the meeting, Ed and 2EC, the third person, gave a talk about battery power for portable operations, and we had a lively back and forth discussing battery technology and how to size your setup for portable. The slide deck from Saturday's presentation can be found in the show notes. Next month's meeting's presenter is scheduled to be Andy K1RA, who will be discussing multi-band, multi-mode digital decoding and reporting using SDRs. Andy runs one of the biggest SDR-based listening stations in our area, reporting data to the Reverse Beacon network and providing web-based software-defined radios as a service to the community. I use the data that comes from Andy's systems on a daily basis to enhance my operations on the air, and this promises to be a fascinating presentation. More details to come in the future Amateur Radio News and Notes. Spring contest season continues this week with one of the biggest contests of the year, the CQ Worldwide WPX contest on single sideband. This is another contest where you can work a ton of DX, but what makes this one special is that everyone can work everyone. The WPX part is referring to an interesting component of the contest where different call sign prefixes are the multipliers. So for me, the call prefix would be November 2. So if you worked me, you'd get a multiplier. Whiskey 2 would be another, as would Kilo 2. Throw a different number in there and you get still more. So the points escalate quickly, and almost all contacts are good contacts. The contest starts at 0 UTC on Saturday, March 29th. That's 8 p.m. Eastern on Friday night, and ends on 23:59 UTC on Sunday. That's 7:59 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. During that period of time, a single operator can work 36 of the 48 hours, and any off times must be a minimum of an hour with no contacts logged. Bands allowed for the contest include 160 meters, 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, 15 meters, and 10 meters. The exchange is RST plus a serial number, so 5925 if you're someone's 25th contact. Make sure you get the serial number, as it is required to match the QSO for it to count. The final score is the QSO points multiplied by the number of prefixes worked. QSO points are 3 for contacts on different continents on 10, 15, and 20 meters, and 6 points on 40 meters, 80 meters, and 160 meters. On the same continent but different countries, points are 1 point for 10, 15, and 20 meters, and 2 points for 40, 80, and 160 meters. And finally, contacts in the same country are 1 point on all bands. The prefix multipliers are applied only once, regardless of band or frequency of operation, and prefixes are a combination of the letters and numbers in the first half of the call. So N4, W4, WA4, S51, or even LY1000, they're all separate prefixes to be counted. For entry, single operator categories include high power, which is not exceeding 1500 watts, low power, not exceeding 100 watts, QRP, not exceeding 5 watts. There's also a bunch of overlay categories that can be entered alongside your main category, like Tribander, Rookie, Classic, and Youth. Check the rules for the details on these. There's also multi-operator categories, including Multi-1, Multi-2, Multi-Unlimited, and Multi-Distributed. And again, check the rules for full details on those. With band conditions being pretty great due to us being near the top of Solar Cycle 25, this will be a great opportunity to work the world. Have fun and good luck! HF Signals, makers of the zBitx series of radios that includes the popular SDRs radio, announced a new radio in their lineup at the end of last year called the zBitx, or zBitx if you prefer. It's a 5-watt all-band, all-mode SDR using the Raspberry Pi 02W and an integrated display for just $150 or $178 shipped. Since the Raspberry Pi is integrated with the system, it can do digital modes like FT8 without additional hardware, so no computer is required. As you can imagine, lots of folks raced to be on the pre-order list for this rig, your author included. And the original plan was to have them shipped by the end of February, but there were delays associated with parts acquisition and due to the Chinese New Year, and some firmware update issues that pushed things back a bit. But it was announced that the rigs began shipping this week, with folks getting delivery dates as early as Wednesday. As I write this, mine hasn't shipped yet, but hopefully it will be dispatched soon. The rigs are currently not for sale until the pre-orders are fulfilled, but founder Ashar Farhan, VU2ESE, has said once they can have a 10-day fulfillment cycle again, they will start taking orders again. More information on the zBitx can be found at hfsignals.com. And a reminder about some of the MVARC Nets on the air. We have our 2-meter net, which happens Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on the repeater, which is immediately followed by a C4FM digital net using Yaesu System Fusion on the same frequency. On the weekends, we've got our MVARC slow-speed CW roundtable Saturday and Sunday mornings at 7:30 a.m. at 3.565 megahertz for CW, usually going about 12 to 15 words a minute, but we'll QRS, or that means slow down for you, to whatever you're comfortable at. And also, following that, is the MVARC Cherry Tree Net, which is also Saturday and Sunday, but this time at 8:30 a.m. at 3.920 megahertz lower sideband. And of course, we'd always love to have you along for the fun. All right, now it's time to talk about what's happening with DX. You know, when one of these major contests is on the calendar, like CQ Worldwide WPX SSB, well, operators fan out around the world to bring DX locales on the air. And this weekend is no different. So there's going to be a lot of DX on the air for you to enjoy. Stations on the air will include Bonaire, São Vicente Island, Cabo Verde, the Madeira Islands, Antigua, Rodriguez Island, Vanuatu, Guadalupe Island, Tanzania, Cayman Islands, Grenada, Dominica Island, Cook Islands, Martinique, St. Martin Island, Mali, Comoro Islands, Solomon Islands, Sri Lanka, Benin, Senegal, and Antarctica. A calendar of DX expeditions can be found at dxnews.com/calendar. All right, and now time for the solar activity update. As we go to press, the solar index, or SFI, was at 157, and the estimated sunspot number was 95. Over the last week, the SFI has decreased. Geomagnetic fields have been causing periods of G1 and G2 level storms in the last few days, with a KP value of 6 being experienced midweek. Much of this was being caused by a very large coronal hole, causing high-speed streams of wind directed at Earth, and KP values are expected to hover around 4 today and decline into the low 3s tomorrow, with active conditions persisting. High solar winds, which are currently around 800 kilometers a second, are expected to continue today but should wane this weekend. Flare activity has been low and is expected to remain so for the next several days. The chance of R1 to R2 radio blackouts is forecast to be at 25%, and R3 or greater blackouts are at 1%. With a few exceptions due to the now waning solar winds, conditions have been favorable overall, and it remains a fantastic time for amateurs of all license classes to get on the air and work the world. Conditions should be good for this weekend's contest. Good sources of real-time solar information include spaceweatherlive.com and solarham.com. A good overview of conditions can be found at dx.qsl.net/propagation. You can see delay or absorption data and associated radio blackouts at the NOAA DRAP predictions page, and to see real-time maximum usable frequency and critical frequency, or FOF2, information from RadioSonde data, visit prop.kc2g.com. And, of course, some upcoming contests. Well, we mentioned earlier the big one, and that is the CQ Worldwide WPX contest on SSB. But also, there's a few other ones happening. Also on the contest calendar this weekend, we can look forward to the Sasquatch Stomp, the Feldhell Sprint, the Classic Exchange on CW, and, as always, the K1USN SSTs, the MSTs, and the CWTs will also be on the air. The full contest calendar with events and exchanges can be found at contestcalendar.com. And finally, let's wrap it up with some interesting online radio content. Got a whole bunch this week. Tim, G5TM, did some calculations on how much lithium iron phosphate battery you need for your operations. Oxford Shortwave Log took a look at the Choyang LC90 shortwave and internet radio. Michael, KB9VBR, takes a look at the Surecom SW28F, SWR, and watt meter. Craig, KM6LYW, adds a USB port to his Yaesu HT for digital operations. Kevin, KB9RLW, finds a workaround for a PL tone issue with the ICOM 705 when he works satellites. Bill, AJ8B, talks to ARRL CEO David, NA2AA, about his operating and his day job for the DX Mentor podcast. Hayden, VK7HH, talks about some Retivus deals on Amazon. Kevin, W1DED, talks to Mark, K1RX, about contesting tips and tricks. Kevin, 2E0, Whiskey Mike Golf, uses the inexpensive vertical from AliExpress and gives his thoughts. Morton, LB0, Fox India, takes a look at the Sierra radio system station's controller. Josh, KI6NAZ, compares telescoping 2-meter and 70 center HT antennas. Linus, Lena Yankee 2 Hotel, puts the Bomatech flight deck through its paces. Matt, M0DQW, takes a look at the Baofeng DM32UV and is pleasantly surprised. Jim, WT1W, takes a look at a USB cable tester. Great Scott takes a look at USB PPS for variable power supply via USB-C. Kevin, 2E0 Whiskey Mike Golf, uses the FX4CR and really enjoys it. Kevin, W1DED, talks to the contest crew about strategies for CQWPX SSB. George, VK2AOE, shows his homebrew single tube rig with a digital VFO. Walt, K4 OGO, puts together an inexpensive HF setup for a fly-in operation. Rob, N1NUG, takes a look at the GA800 active loop antenna. Steve, KM9G, makes a 2-meter go bag. Mike K1RA takes a look at the Malahit DSP2 receiver. Kevin, W1DED, talks real-time contesting with Victor, VA2WA, and Craig, K9CT. And Kevin also talks with Levi, K6JO, about his dominant ARRL DX SSB performance from ZF1A. That's it for this week. I'm Ed, November 2 Echo Charlie. Thanks as always for coming along for the ride. Best 73. And we look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Amateur Radio News and Notes. Have a great week.